Hello everyone, welcome back to Rats in Boilersuits, the Torchwood podcast.
My name is Steffan.
And my name is Kim, and we are making our way through Torchwood. Today we are looking at Series 1, Episode 8, called They Keep Killing Susie. Steph, would you like to give us a brief synopsis of They Keep Killing Susie?
Okay, so Torchwood are called to investigate a series of murders, and the key thing is that the latest murder, which seems to be a serial killer, has written the word Torchwood in the blood of the victims on the wall. They realise that the only way they're going to get information is by bringing these people back from the dead using a magic glove, specifically the magic glove from the first episode, and end up using this glove to resurrect dead Torchwood member Susie Costello because she was the expert on the glove. It turns out that was her plan all along. She always planned to be resurrected by this glove, and her life is being drained from Gwen Cooper. So it becomes a race against the clock to save Gwen and to kill Susie again.
They just keep killing Susie.
Just keep killing Susie.
As I said in the last episode, this one is my favourite episode of Series 1. It just, every time I watch it, it's better than I remember. It's just really good.
Yeah.
I just think, like, there are flaws, it's Torchwood, but from start to finish, I'm just like, this is excellent.
It's so good. There's just something going on at every point. Every character is always doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Every line of dialogue means more than one thing. You know, it's doing character stuff and jokes and plot stuff all at once. It's so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. And it's, I suppose, an episode that is properly about Torchwood. The villain in this is Susie Costello, a former member. So it's very much talking about its own world. I always find that exciting.
Yeah. We're both very blue today.
Yes.
And we have it's different cushions.
Yeah.
No one cares about that but me. I just really like the maroon and the yellow one. But we're very blue. I'm blue. You're blue.
I am blue. I want to talk about my t-shirt, actually, because it says Cofiwch Werthin on it, which is a reference to Cofiwch Tryweryn, which is a very famous graffiti in Wales, based on Tryweryn, a valley in North Wales that was flooded in order to create a reservoir
for the English.
For the English.
Yeah.
So,
which we could talk about for hours, but you should research it yourself.
You know, that is something that is incredibly important, I think, to most Welsh people, certainly to all Welsh speakers. But there is a part of me that's like, so this was a gift from a comedian, another Welsh speaker who also cares passionately about Tryweryn. It means remember to laugh, Cofiwch Werthin.
But not about Tryweryn.
Not about Tryweryn, yeah. I just want it very clear that I am not, this is not an inappropriate joke about the, I mean, no one died. Also, let's point that out.
Yeah, no, they got them to leave first, but that was the...
But they did kill a community.
Yeah.
That was wrong.
And a Welsh-speaking one at that as well.
They keep killing Welsh
They do
communities.
keep trying to kill the Welsh language. And what else do they keep killing? Susie! You know, in episode 1, we were like, the thing about Torchwood is that they're so bad at their job of protecting the Earth. And the best example of that is the first episode where Susie Costello murders 3 people.
Yeah.
And like, she's done it again.
Done it again, yeah.
Like, they just haven't stopped her. And they're like, do you know what we should do, lads? You know that one of us that went mad and killed 3 people? Should bring her back. I think she's not finished.
That's a really
She's
good
just
point.
insane. And then also, towards the end, there's a point where they inform the police that they're rushing to save one of their team and they're going to break the speed limit. And I'm like, look, I get it. Torchwood do important work, and you can argue that a member of Torchwood is very valuable to society, and therefore you should prioritise saving them. But I just think we shouldn't really be endangering all of the public just to save one of Torchwood, because your job is to protect the Earth, okay?
Yeah.
All she's going to do is run away on a ferry.
Yes, that's
like,
true.
That's it.
There's a sense in which this episode is more like a police procedural, because there is sci-fi stuff going on, but at the end of the day, they're just trying to stop someone who has killed.
Yeah.
And who is very happy to kill, and they want to bring her to justice. 2 episodes ago, we had an episode where the monsters turned out to just be a bunch of human cannibals. But actually, this one is also an extremely human threat.
Yeah.
There is a science fiction threat to Gwen's life, but the plot is just hunt down this criminal.
Yeah.
So, shall we take it a scene at a time?
Yeah. So the episode starts with Torchwood being called to the scene of the murder. And I have to immediately nominate for the Torchwood moment of the week just the arrival of the SUV. It's really funny. And they do that thing where they're all four of them will walk in towards the camera and they slow down briefly.
Yeah.
And Jack is wearing sunglasses, but not the cool kind. He looks ridiculous. And they walk up to the crime scene and they're like, hey guys, Torchwood's here, don't worry. It's just ridiculous.
That's it. There are some films where the heroes are cool because that's the way they've been presented.
Mm-hmm.
In Torchwood, the heroes are cool because they're trying to walk in a cool way.
Yeah, the heroes are cool despite the way they're being presented.
It's really interesting. I love the look of this, that it's in broad daylight. There's police tape outside of this house.
Mm-hmm.
It's all looking very exciting. But then Torchwood turn up and the police are just so annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Just, these guys.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever tire of people just being absolutely fed up
It's
of Torchwood.
so good. When did that start? When did they go from being a secret organization to this? It's got to be when Jack takes over. He's just so arrogant. He's like, but I'm a hero. I want people to know what I'm doing.
Jack doesn't do Enigma well.
No.
Because he will burst in with a euphemism and an innuendo.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a subtle man.
No.
So the idea of them having any kind of mysterious cool, no, come off it.
Because the first interaction they have, she says, are you always this dressy for a murder investigation? And Jack's like, what, would you rather me naked? And she says, God help me, the stories are true. So all they know about Torchwood is that Jack is like that. That's it.
Yeah. I also think there is something very delightfully Welsh about the idea that we find out there's a secret organisation and there is not even an iota of us that's like, ooh, that's exciting. No. The idea that if you're a police officer in Cardiff, it's extremely believable that they just think it's naff.
Yeah.
So we go into the house. 2 people have been killed. I think this is the Briscoes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? A husband and wife. Very violent killing. And the killer has left a message in the blood of the victims. And that is just the word Torchwood.
Mm-hmm.
So it really looks like this killer wants Torchwood's attention. And as Jack says, they've got it.
Yeah, I like that. That's our pre-credits, isn't it? That's a good Torchwood episode, you know.
It looks like a normal serial killer,
Mm-hmm.
but the serial killer knows the name Torchwood.
Yeah.
That feels big.
Which
So
also doesn't narrow it down because everybody seems to know the name Torchwood.
That's true, yeah. Something I want to address here is we get Detective Swanson. She's in charge of the police investigation. Now, I realise she is the latest example of something that usually annoys me in Torchwood, which is an unnecessarily English cast member.
Sure.
But I'm okay with it with Detective Swanson.
Because she's great.
Because she's great. She's just brilliant. I think it probably helps that she's black.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when I think of like an English white man
Mm-hmm.
coming and stealing our Welsh roles, I'm a bit offended.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, you can.
Yeah.
You help yourself. But she's also just brilliant.
Yeah.
She hates Torchwood. She also blames them, which is interesting.
Yeah, she says Torchwood walks around the city like you own it. These people are paying the price.
Yeah.
So, like, as far as I'm concerned, you did this.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Whoa
Which
there. Because you don't know what savings that you... Right, you think Jack's an arrogant asshole, that's fine. But even if I found myself interacting with MI5, because that just happened, I'd be like, I'm sure there's a lot I don't know about.
Yeah.
I'll just have to trust that with these particular people, they're probably doing some good work that I don't know about. But maybe that's giving too much faith, because if it's anything like the police, they're probably up to loads of bullshit, and they are.
Yeah, that's true. And I would believe they were corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are corrupt. we know for a fact.
Yeah, but they're corrupt in a very gentle way.
That's true. They mean well.
They just like pretend that people who've been killed by weevils are washed up in canals.
Yeah.
You know, like it's fine.
It's just a normal level
Yeah.
of low-key corruption. So it's a running theme in Russell T Davis's Doctor Who that people will hold the Doctor responsible for madness, for just the wild alien stuff that surrounds the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's always important to see Torchwood as like a dark mirror to the Doctor.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing here. It's, look, when you act the way that you do, which is wildly irresponsible, then there's going to be unforeseen consequences.
Yeah. So as they're looking at the crime scene, Tosh gets... I don't know how she finds out. Is she looking at CCTV or is she hearing their radio conversations, the police?
I suppose so.
But she lets them know that the results of the DNA test of the killer has come back. And so they all go out to find out. And Detective Swanson says, look, nothing out of the ordinary. Oh, there was this compound we didn't recognise, though. And shows it to them. And Owen and Jack have a moment where they're like, oh, God, that's Retcon. He's got Retcon in his blood. This could be connected to why he killed. And it's all a bit scary.
Yeah. So let's talk about Retcon. What is Retcon?
Retcon is the amnesia pill that they give. I think in the first episode, Jack says, I don't know if it's just like a sort of tongue-in-cheek thing,
Yeah.
but he says it's got like a bit of amnesia, a bit of something else, and a dash of denial or something. So it's the perfect remedy to make you forget, and they can choose sort of what time period you're forgetting. It's a carefully made substance that Torchwood have developed and only use, apparently.
Yes.
They're the only ones.
Yeah. In the first episode, I think his words is, just a little dash of retcon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the amnesia pill is not retcon, but there is a small amount of something called retcon,
Sure.
which we find out in this episode is sort of the magic key ingredient that makes it work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was probably intended as a joke in the first episode.
Yeah.
I think most nerds know what retcon means. It literally stands for retroactive continuity.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is it refers to anything which you've made up and you claim that it's always been the case.
Mm-hmm.
People usually think of it as like changing something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you claim that, if you were writing a Spider-Man story that reveals that actually the spider that bit him was an alien spider, you'd go, oh, that's a retcon, that's a big change.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be a big change.
Sometimes it's just giving an easy answer to something. I guess like obvious answers in Doctor Who would be like the force field on the TARDIS doors. They weren't there right from the beginning. They came in somewhere in the middle. And then you're like, oh, that's why the aliens have never gotten in before, right? Like an easy solution that just explains a lot of questions.
It can be that, but it can also be as simple. Soap operas do retcon all the time. So it can be, you've got a character saying, when I was 12, I went on a picnic. That's a retcon because you are creating story that is in the character's past, but you're creating it now. Mm-hmm. But we never think of that as a retcon because we don't really need a word to describe that, so we rarely use it. But the idea, therefore, that you are changing someone's memory, it's quite neat to use the word retcon for that. Mm-hmm. But what that means is, it means that the killer has taken a drug that pretty much only Torchwood has access to. So the implication is that this is Torchwood's fault, especially with the message on the wall. Yeah. So they're panicking about the implications, because if one person who's taken retcon has had an episode and has suddenly lashed out and become violent, what's to stop anyone who's taken retcon? There's a bit where Gwen says, I've taken it. Like, am I going to go out of control?
And Jack says, we better stay away from sharp objects.
That's
it.
Yeah.
He's not worried. Owen is really excited by the prospect of it.
Yeah.
He says, what if they all become psychotic?
Yeah.
But...
And Tosh is like, I don't know if that's the tone.
Yeah.
And he goes, think about it though. It'll be...
Mean Streets.
Mean Streets. He's genuinely thrilled. And I think it's interesting seeing Owen here as someone who's just properly nihilistic and just lives for the chaos, which I don't know if that's how he's been presented in the past, but I buy it completely.
Yeah.
Yanto's asked how many people have been given retcon, and it's 2008.
2008, yeah.
So the threat is we need to find this person and we need to work out as soon as possible if this drug is actually responsible, because if so, that's a lot of potential violence.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing is that they have everybody they've given it to on record, and no one that they know of gave the drug to him. So they also don't know how it's in his blood.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
I think what I want to talk about here is, of course, this is a decoy. That's not what's going on. 2008 people are not going to have violent episodes because of the drug. Mm-hmm. But the truth is more interesting than what's being set up here. I like that we think we're investigating a drug gone wrong, but it turns out it's so much more than that. So next, Gwen suggests using the glove. Yeah. So what is the glove? So the glove is a glove that brings people back to life for around a minute with practice, which is what we saw them using in the first episode that caught her attention and ended up being kind of what brought her to joining Torchwood. They had found that Susie had been killing people to test the glove because it works best if they have like a traumatic, violent death. And they put it away because at the time they were like, looks like this has gone a bit wrong. The glove is, sci-fi dangerous. What did we just power corrupts dangerous? Yes. So they put it away in Yanto's box of spooky things. However, apparently all it takes is a quick suggestion from Gwen to be like, hang on a minute, guys. You had that glove that brings people back to life. And they're like, no, it's too dangerous. Not after what it did to Susie. And she's like, but right, this is Torchwood's fault. So Torchwood has got to fix it. And they're like, yeah, right then. How is it that easy? That's my second nomination for Torchwood Moment of the Week. Yes. It should not be that easy to sway them on what was a pretty heavy, this is too much rule. Yeah. And now it's just like, but guys, come on. And they're like, do you know what, Gwen?
I think you're right. Let's crack open the box again. It's bizarre.
So I've got 2 points. One of which is that Yanto's Box of Spooky Things would be a great title for a Big Finish audio.
But yeah. And it could be that flashback episode that you wanted.
Yes!
If we were like, if Torchwood was an American 24-part series, they'd have an episode where they're like, oh, guys, remember the murders?
Okay, this is genuinely a good idea, I think, is a clip show to episodes that you've never seen.
Yeah, I love that. Like in Community.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. We'll pitch that. Second point. So the glove looks like a gauntlet. It's this huge metal thing. And they have a conversation about it where Owen's like, we never picked a cool name for this glove. I like this moment. Tosh says, well, we called it the Resurrection Gauntlet, didn't we? And Owen's like, yeah, I said cool name.
Which is the same kind of tone as anything helpful.
Yes.
So it's like they're more sort of like playful friendship, which I like to see.
Yeah. And then Yanto suggests the Risen Mitten, which is the start of an extremely strange running joke in this episode.
Yeah, but it's like, the reason it pisses me off is because like I'd be fine with a stupid name, but it doesn't even rhyme, Steph.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't even rhyme.
No, that's the point, is that Yanto, what's the next one he says? He comes up with the life
knife, yeah.
For the knife that can help bring people back to life. That rhymes.
Yeah.
But Risen Mitten doesn't.
What would a better version be?
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Is that almost nothing good rhymes with glove or mitten. The shove glove shoves you back from the dead, but it doesn't. It pulls you, so it doesn't work.
That's something that we need to ask other people for.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, if
Come up with your best name for life knife is great, but maybe can be improved on. Risen Mitten, what are your options?
And they don't have to rhyme.
I think they do.
Okay.
I think they have to rhyme.
I just think we're going to have very limited options for the rhyme. But I liked Resurrection Gauntlet. If someone got me a birthday gift and said it's a Resurrection Gauntlet, I'd be psyched.
Yeah.
The thing I like about him coming up with Risen Mitten, the name, terrible.
Absolutely.
But the fact that he's in a good enough mood to play along and be a bit silly is lovely.
Yeah.
It suggests that maybe time has moved on for him since the death of his creepy cyber girlfriend, Lisa. Now he's sort of in a better mood.
Yeah.
I've got a theory about that.
It's because they're banging.
Yeah,
right?
it's because they're banging.
I
think they're already banging.
Yeah, banging.
Yeah, my theory is that Yanto and Jack are already sleeping together. Because when I first watched
that would
this...
certainly put me in a good mood.
Yeah. I just think no one comes up with puns that bad unselfconsciously.
Yeah.
If they're not sleeping with a handsome...
Because that's the thing as well, actually. It's not just the fact that he puts forward the idea. It's the fact that they all look at him. So he's already got this place in the team where they're like, oh, Yanto's the silly one who will give us a deadpan joke about this. And they all look to him like, oh, Yanto.
So there's this idea that, okay, Yanto's been a laugh for a while now. No one is surprised by him being a laugh. So it does feel like there's been a bit of a time jump since the last episode.
Yeah, it does actually.
We know later on that this episode is set 3 months after episode 1. Sure. It's hard to know how much time passes between each episode.
What does that give us an average of?
So it gives us an average. So
like one every 10 days, maybe?
Yeah, probably, because we're looking at 1.5 episodes per month-ish.
Sure.
So
about the same as us.
Yeah. Oh god. But I'm happy with the idea that actually maybe there's a bigger jump between episode 7 and 8 than between most episodes.
Yeah.
And that's enough for Yanto and Jack to start sleeping together and for Yanto to get in a better mood.
Yeah.
When I first watched this, I thought the end of this episode was Yanto kind of proposing a sexual relationship to Jack for the first time. I thought that was the start of their relationship. Look, watching it again, I don't think that's true.
No, because he understands what he's talking about so quickly. That would be ballsy.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. It's the speed at which Jack goes, oh, okay, I know what's going to happen now. And it's interesting how that corresponds to Owen and Gwen, where last episode they were in this incredibly good mood, but it was sort of, because we were seeing it through Tosh's eyes, it was quite difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas here, Yanto, well, he's still quite a reserved, quiet introvert. So a good mood for Yanto is bad puns. It's not throwing things and...
Yeah. But Tosh seems happier too.
Yeah, she does.
So maybe Jack and Yanto have been sleeping together, and maybe Gwen and Owen have gone to a pub quiz with Tosh to cheer up, because everyone seems like they're in a better mood. I think they finally learned their lesson. Yeah. Oh, one thing I did want to mention actually is that in the last episode, we talked about the scene where Tosh is being debriefed about the situation to Jack.
Yeah.
But I rewatched that bit to double check my memory,
Mm.
and it's not. It's Yanto, which makes the whole thing much sadder because he's like,
Oh.
having just gone through a similar thing where my girlfriend tried to kill everyone. I'm just going to take some notes from you. And I'm like, that changes it. So I like to think, because I always think Yanto and Tosh have a kind of a special friendship.
That's nice.
But having looked at that again, I think it makes sense that maybe that was a bonding point for them. So Yanto's happy because he's sleeping with Jack, and he's happy because he's bonding with Tosh, and everyone's friends now, and we can all just move on.
Yeah, that's nice. I love the idea that this is the point from which they are now a bonded team.
Mm-hmm.
And then here comes Susie as a reminder of a time when no one got on, because none of them know Susie.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they are learning lessons from this as well, of how important it is to be more bonded as people, as well as working together as colleagues.
I hope so.
Mm.
Who wrote this one? This one has 2 writers. Is that correct?
Yes. Credited writers for this are Dan McCulloch and Paul Tomlin.
Mm-hmm.
Quite hard to find much information on them.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the point of Torchwood, compared to Doctor Who, was to be a training ground for up-and-coming writers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are far more names that were, at the time, less well-known, perhaps. And some of those people carried on in the field of writing and are more well-known now. Others, I don't know, maybe they got into production. I don't know. I don't know where a lot of people ended up. Helen Rayner's another example. Helen Rayner now, brilliant career as a writer, but at the time, The Ghost Machine, I think, was her first script.
Sure. Wow.
Which is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that is amazing.
The other thing to say about the writing of this episode is my memory is that because Indira Varma, who plays Susie Costello, she was about to leave the country, presumably to film something, or maybe she was moving somewhere.
Because she'd murdered Gwen, and so she
was... she got to get on that ferry. So they had to get this episode locked in and ready very fast.
Cool.
So what they did was Russell T Davies just took over the script and redrafted it himself.
Sure.
So it's a very quick redraft, but I think you can tell there are certain lines in this that are incredibly Russell T Davies lines.
Yeah, well, because that's what I was going to say. That's why I was so interested to find out what other things these writers had done, is because it feels so Russell. It feels like the world ethos is Russell's, but the writing technique is very different.
Yes.
And that's why I really like it.
It'd be really interesting to hear from those writers, you know, what the balance is, what were their ideas. You know, it's always so hard to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So they take the Risen Man to the autopsy room, and they're all fighting over who should use it. The others all tried the first time. Jack gives it a go, and they wake up an earlier victim of this same killer to try and get answers. He panics, and Jack isn't very good at the glove, so it doesn't last very long, and he dies. And they're like, well, that didn't work, end of. But then Gwen suggests that she tries because she never tried the first time. And Owen and Jack are like, I think this might go a little bit wrong. But they don't care because it's Torchwood, so they do it anyway. Gwen puts on the glove. She wakes up Mark Briscoe, our latest victim, where Torchwood was written, in his blood. And they're really gentle with him. I really like that bit, that they're very gentle with him. We're like, we're looking after your wife. We just need to ask you. They ask him a couple of questions. He knew the killer. It was a guy called Max. He went to a group that they were both a part of called Pilgrim, which was like a support group thing. Towards the end, they're like, can you give us another name? Was there anyone else who was at the group? And as Mark is dying, he says, Susie. And they all look at each other like, Susie? And they've now figured out that it must be their Susie, and it's all starting to connect, and they're going to have to wake her up to ask her some questions. I really like my favourite line in this scene. They're like, what was her name? And he goes, Susie. And they all look at each other. And Owen mutters to himself, there must be lots of women called Susie. He's like, well, it could be anyone. There must be lots of women. Yes, Owen. There must be lots of women called Susie. And Jack's like, not connected to this case. No, obviously.
Yeah.
Why are we even toying with the idea that it could just be a coincidence? Of course it's your Susie. It's like, there must be lots of women called Susie. Yes, Owen. Just really, I love it. It's my favourite line of the episode.
Yeah. I love the performance of the two dead guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they really capture just the terror. And it's a running theme in this episode that there's nothing after death. So they have come back from nothingness, from darkness and silence. So they're just horrified. And then they come back. And what do they remember of this world? They remember being attacked and being distressed.
Yeah.
So the first guy just wants to see his mother.
Big shout out to the actor who plays that first corpse they speak to. He is played by, I checked, Daniel Llewellyn Williams.
Okay.
So good Welsh actor.
Yeah.
Not sneaking another English person in here, Steffan.
Very
Pleased
good.
to know. That death is one of the best deaths I've ever seen on TV. And there's something so sinister. Like, he goes from looking like an alive person to a corpse. And he does it with a hiccup. He's like, let me see my mother. And then all his face drops, and it's just so good. But it's just such a small part of the episode, but it really, the silence as he dies is really, really sinister because his performance is so good.
Yeah. There's a nice moment where Jack explains how the glove works, and it's that you need compassion and empathy. That's why Susie could use it better than the others, is she was a more compassionate, empathic person.
Which is interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what Jack says to Gwen is, just be yourself. And it's our first reminder that that is the defining thing about Gwen Cooper, is that she's compassionate and kind and empathic.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be really important in this episode.
Yeah. And so she makes the glove last way longer than Jack, right? She does he gets 30 seconds and she gets like a full minute and a half or something like that. Yeah. So she's already very good at it.
She's better than Susie is the key thing.
I also really like that while they're speaking to Mark Briscoe and they're finding stuff out, they're like, oh, give us more information. I know it's scary, but like, what can you give us? They're like, oh, Pilgrim. It's that woman. She went to Pilgrim. And then Tosh is in like back at her computer interacting with them and searching stuff on their software as they go. But she shouts back to them. So they're being really gentle, like, can you tell us anything? And he gives Max and Pilgrim. And Tosh is like, trying Max and Pilgrim. You're going to have to get more out of him. And I'm like, feel the room, Tosh. They're all being so gentle. And she's like, okay, guys, investigation. She's really inappropriate.
And you get this violent injection of what all of them used to be like.
Yeah.
But Gwen's obviously had a word with the others in the room, in the little medical room. Mm-hmm. But she hasn't spoken to Tosh because Tosh is on the the She doesn't need to know.
And she's so quiet. Why would I need to tell her to be quiet?
Oi, guys! Right, I'm trying it. It's not enough.
Can you ask the dead man? What is Pilgrim? Listen, what is Pilgrim, dead man?
If we don't get anything from him, we're going to have to do his dead wife.
What?
The other thing to talk about in this scene is we get Yanto's love of stopwatches. Mm-hmm. Owen's got a line, give that boy a stopwatch and he's happy. Which at this point, it's just a throwaway line you might think nothing about.
But also it gives Yanto another opportunity for one of his little deadpan little lines, because he's like, it's the button on the top.
That is nice.
That's the bit I really like.
Yeah, very good. Next, they go to Susie's lockup. And it turns out that if you die on the job in Torchwood, all of your possessions get shoved in a storage space. Gwen's like, what happens when I die? What if I want to leave my stuff to Reese? And Jack jokes, oh, we'll lock him up as well. But it's sort of not a joke. It's
because they've got tons of space for bodies.
Yeah. And I don't think they'll actually lock Reese up, but we do wonder whether they would retcon him.
They definitely retcon him, yeah.
I think he's going to forget Gwen.
Horrible.
So it's a very scary insight into the future. And that's another running thing in this episode, that we are reminded that this is a job for life, and that's quite dark. Mm-hmm. If you die on the job, they keep your stuff, they keep your body, and they might just wipe every trace of you from the earth.
Yeah.
So we're here at Susie's locker. Why? Are they looking for clues?
So it was because when Susie's name was mentioned, they realised she's connected. So they're looking for evidence because they're trying to try everything else before they bring her back, basically. Yeah. So they've gone to look for evidence. Lots of parts of this episode really stuck with me as a teenager because it's that kind of... There's lots of very dark, very Torchwood-esque just chats about life and the meaning of life and the world. And just things that really, like, at that age really stuck with me. Like Jack says as they're walking into the locker, he says, tread carefully, people, with respect. This is the life of Susie Costello. And then Tosh says, I suppose that's all we are in the end, just boxes. And I think that kind of encapsulates everything that is Torchwood's ethos.
Yes.
But it's like, we're just going to say this as a passing comment, but also life is pointless.
Yeah, yeah. We are able to deal with it with a bit of distance because Susie, we as an audience don't feel particularly attached to her, and even the other members of Torchwood didn't seem that close with her. But there is something spooky about moving through a room full of the possessions of someone who's died.
They are distanced from it the whole time. Like when Gwen asks if any of them knew about her family, Tosh says she wiped all her records because she was really good at that. And Owen brings them right back to, he's like, she's good at murder too.
Yeah.
Don't forget. Let's not get too attached to her. Yeah. She killed 3 people. I'm not saying Owen's a bit of an asshole and therefore I think he'd be okay with murder.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting that his behaviour isn't very important to him. Yeah. But we find out in later episodes that what is important to him is life, even though he's a cynic.
Yeah.
Because in a later episode, he says that he became a doctor because he thought if he could save at least one life, his would be worth living.
Yeah.
And I always find reminders of that really interesting because I still don't like Owen.
Yeah.
And it'll be a while until I do.
Yeah.
But I just think the characters are surprisingly well defined in moments like that. You know,
Yeah.
like when you know them and what their futures are.
Yeah.
Like those kind of things are at least consistent, even if I don't always like him.
Yeah.
And so as they're searching, they find a little leaflet that was Susie's copy of this little pamphlet of Pilgrim, which was like a support group. And
Yeah.
as Tosh explains later, it's so archaic. It's just handwritten, photocopied and passed out. She wasn't even online, Tosh
Yeah.
says. So it's just this really cute little thing. And that's their proof that she definitely was in the group. They now need to wake her up to speak to her. So they finally agree, okay, we're going to have to wake her up. Already, I'd be like, I don't think this is such a good idea. But it's Torchwood. So that's what they do. They head back to the hub. They pull Susie out of their big stash of bodies and they get ready to wake her up.
I'm going to talk about going to the bodies. We realise that there's just this bank of bodies and all ex-Torchwood employees who've died are stacked away here. Gwen questions that and Jack says the same thing he said when she asked about Susie's possessions being repossessed, which is rules and regulations. Just yeah, I mean,
he loves a rule.
He does love a rule.
Yeah.
There's lots of rules they should have and don't. But one thing that is definitely in black and white is we get you and your stuff and your physical body. That's ours.
Yeah.
There was a tweet I really enjoyed from Maya, one of our listeners, saying when they watch Torchwood now, they just can't get past the fact that Jack thinks a driving rota is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is now the single most defining trait.
Everything he does, they're like, that's where his line is.
Yeah. So I think here, yeah, of course, we have to, come on, we're a secret organisation. Of course we have to take your body. Of course we have to take all the stuff you've ever owned.
But don't even think about bringing up that driving rotor again, Gwen.
No, we're going to vibe it.
Now, Gwen obviously has all her empathy and has a great track record of her first time using the glove, but it's a bit more complicated this time because the last time Gwen saw Susie, she tried to kill her. And Jack says, you and me both. And again, Jack and Gwen seem perfectly fine discussing all these things about the fact that he can't die in front of the others when no one else knows.
Yeah.
And all we get is a little look from Owen where he's like, what did he just say? They never address it.
Yeah.
But they're just like, oh, you and me both. You know, that little in-joke we have about the fact that I'm immortal.
Yeah.
Done. They try the first time and it doesn't work. At which point they realise what was missing. Aha! When Susie killed all those people, she used the knife. They said, we've seen it before, like metallic resonance. It sort of completes the circuit. It's made out of the same metal. Bit of sci-fi nonsense, sure. And so, do they think, this is all getting a bit too far now. We're going to have to get another item out of Yanto's box of spooky things. Or do they think, let's get the other item out of Yanto's box of spooky things? So they're talking about how the knife connects to it. And they're like, but this is weird. She's already dead. That's not going to work. And Gwen's like, okay, so we kill her again. And I would be like, Gwen's looking a little bit too eger to kill Susie. Should we shut this down? No. And they carry on.
Yeah.
So the little scrape doesn't work. And Gwen says, I'm sorry, Jack, you're going to have to do it properly. So he gets the knife, he puts it in her heart, and she wakes straight back up and is panicked. And then eventually realizes where she is.
Yeah.
They start to ask her the details that they need. Someone has started killing. You were in Pilgrim. This guy called Max, what do you know about him? She's like, you brought me all the way back just for Max? I'm like, that's rude.
Yeah.
But then she's like, hang on a minute, who is using the glove? Oh, I should have known, Gwen bloody Cooper. But I should have known.
Yeah. Well,
she doesn't have much context for that.
No, but well, it's interesting because the tone of it is just so annoyed. She's like, ugh, you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that implies that Susie was on a journey in episode 1 that we weren't aware of, where she was probably clocking the fact that Torchwood were as interested in Gwen as she was in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if she already was like, oh, they're going to like this new person. They're going to want her to come. And then insult to injury, yeah, and she's replaced you.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that Susie has issues with feeling wanted or understood or liked by her colleagues. It's just the worst possible thing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's like if you were brought back from the dead and realised that your partner in life is now with your worst enemy.
Yeah.
You're like, oh no.
So she starts to slip away and they're like, oh, we're losing her. That's the time limit. And Gwen is like, no, stay here, damn you.
Yeah.
And tries to force it. And that kind of makes it have this sort of kickback effect where she gets hurt and thrown away as Susie dies.
Yeah.
Or so we think. At this point, Gwen has fallen on the floor. Susie has, to the knowledge of the group, died again. So it's all gotten a bit messy. And Jack's like, I told you they get hooked on the glove, like it has this addictive quality. And Owen is helping Gwen up and is like, all right, don't make a fuss. Like, they've made so many bad decisions again and again. And then when they're proved wrong, and Jack finally agrees that, he's like, okay, no, I told you they get hooked. This was a bad idea. I shouldn't have agreed to it. I was like, oh, you. Always getting so stressed out about our magical equipment. No. Stop!
Yeah.
And then it transpires that Susie is not in fact dead again. She's just unconscious. As Yanto says, he's still counting. The machinery says that she's just unconscious, and Owen doesn't believe him. And now they're a bit confused.
There's genuine affection between Gwen and Owen here, I think. I think he's quite... I don't know if loving is too strong a word, but they've gone from this sort of slightly mean kind of banter that they had in the last episode, and now there just seems to be genuine affection. Obviously, I don't think this is a healthy affair to be continuing, but at the very least you can say they do seem to like each other and he's there for her.
I guess also because it was a secret affair.
Yeah.
After Tosh's thing with the necklace, it wasn't secret anymore. So maybe a lot of the secret excitement is gone. And they're like, okay, well, everyone knows now, so we may as well, like, at least we get on, you know?
That's a good point. So next, they interrogate Susie. I love an interrogation scene, especially when the woman being interrogated has a massive hole in her head and brain, which is so creepy, that hole. Which is interesting as well, because I had been thinking, she was shot in the brain. Would she be able to come back from that? And it's really clear, yeah, that injury is still there.
Yeah.
So her life is really supernatural. And she's interrogated by Jack and Gwen. So we find out about Susie's father, who's going to be a significant figure in this. And Susie is shocked that he doesn't even know she's dead. Now, we know that's because she wiped her own records.
Yeah.
So they couldn't even get hold of him anyway. But she's horrified. My father doesn't know I'm dead. And Gwen has an incredible line. Well, you're not anymore.
But she says it like so small as well. She's like, well, you're not anymore.
Oh.
Like, sort of, she's not being sarky.
Yeah.
It's like a genuine, like, well, you're not anymore. Like, you know, like she's like, could we all just look on the positive side, guys?
Gwen, I really feel like Gwen is the person who sort of sees an argument happening and is like, should we just, well, you know, and she'll just say anything to try and de-escalate. Interesting point, I think, is that Owen admits that he's scared of Susie. She knows that Owen's listening. And a lot of this is, yeah, Susie knows what's happening. My former colleague's listening in to me, the monster Susie Costello. She tries to goad Owen. I think it's really interesting that he's happy to admit, yeah, you absolutely terrify me.
Yeah.
I think that's slightly surprising from Owen, who we might think of as having a bit of bravado. But he, in this episode, is the most comfortable of any of them to say she is an incredibly dangerous individual.
Yeah.
And I'm not cool about it.
At this point, Susie's still very confused why they brought her back. They show her the pictures of the members of Pilgrim. And they're like, oh, Max has started killing. And then she goes, oh my God, how many victims? And Gwen, excellent line, she goes, 3, same as you. And it's just really good that, like, while they're starting to treat her like a person, they're like, lest we forget, she's a murderer.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Well done, Gwen.
Yeah.
So Susie explains that Max was someone to talk to. That's her story right now, at least, is that she could talk to him and he would listen, and then she would give him Retcon so he'd forget about it. So he has received a dose of Retcon every week for 2 years. And at the moment, we are thinking, okay, so that much Retcon just makes you go out of your mind then, apparently. Although later we find out that's not the case.
Yeah, I like that. So Jack says, you overdosed him. She's like, well, I didn't know that. And then she says something like, it's always my fault, isn't it? Never bloody stops being my fault. And I'm like, you don't get to play the victim card now. Like, oh, guys, why can't you just let me die? It never stops being my fault. Like, no. This isn't one of those like, oh, I'm so clumsy. I smashed your favorite bowl and I feel bad about it. You murdered 3 people. Yeah. And then at this point, we think you overdosed a man and he ended up being sent into a psychosis where he's killed people. It's not like a clumsy accident, is it? It was like a substance that's like classified that you were just sneaking out the hub to give to someone illegally.
Yeah.
No.
Of course, we know that she's the mastermind behind all of this. All of this is incredibly deliberate, very careful planning.
Mm-hmm.
All of these deaths are absolutely her plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that when she says, it never stops being my fault, she doesn't think that. She doesn't feel that. She knows for a fact. So what she's actually doing, presumably, is trying to manipulate Gwen.
Mm-hmm.
I think she wants Gwen to feel sorry for her. And that's another interesting aspect of this episode, is that a big point is that Gwen is so much better than Susie because Gwen has empathy and compassion. But Susie knows that.
Yeah.
And she's using that empathy and compassion to manipulate her.
She's very good at it. So this is the point where Susie identifies for the gang Lucy Mackenzie, a student who works in a bar in town, who is the only person whose picture isn't visible and therefore is the only person left of Pilgrim who hasn't been murdered by Max. They go to find her. And the weird thing for me is Torchwood, they can be like the police, right?
Yeah.
They can go to the club and they can be like, hello, we're Torchwood. We'd like to speak to Lucy Mackenzie. And someone who works there can be like, oh yeah, I'll just grab her.
Yeah.
Take her away and be like, hey, so we just want to let you know this stuff has been happening. We're going to ask you some questions and protect her.
Yeah.
What they actually do is they just go to the club. They just they go down to club with their little camera things on their heads or whatever. I don't know, they're all wearing GoPros or something. Yeah. And they're walking through this busy crowd of this club trying to identify her while Susie sits back at the hub trying to be like, nope, that's not her, that's not her. Like, what?
Yeah.
What is this method? And I thought, oh, maybe they don't want to cause a scene. But no. Because what happens is they spot her, then they spot a man going to her who they think is Max, but they misidentify him at first and they tackle the wrong guy in front of everyone. So that's clearly not their issue. They tackle him to the ground, and then Susie spots in the camera that the real Max is behind Gwen about to attack her. And she says, Gwen, look out. And then they get the correct guy and stun gun him, which Jack gives a little mention to Yanto because he loves a rhyme. And so it's not that they don't want to cause a scene. If anything, it looks like they specifically wanted to cause a scene.
Every time you think you spot some logic in what Torchwood's doing, they will remind you that there is no logic. No, we're just doing what we do.
Yep.
I love seeing them in the nightclub. You know I love nightclubs in Torchwood. Any nightlife, any bars, great.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is true, but apparently it's a thing where Big Finish, when they hire writers to write Torchwood, are like, you're told as a note, try to avoid bars and nightclubs because it's such a cliche in Torchwood. And I think I want the opposite note.
Yeah. It's
too many.
Always have to have a bar scene.
All the time. But yeah, I want to talk about the stun gun line as well. So Jack shoots the guy and says, that one's for Yanto, Risen Mitten, Life Knife, and the old classic stun gun. And I think that is further evidence that they're sleeping together.
Yeah.
Because Yanto's terrible jokes are fundamentally impossible to enjoy unless you're in love with him.
Yeah.
You must have done this for friends, when like a friend of yours tries something that doesn't quite click, tries a little joke, and it doesn't quite fly in the room, and you are so protective of your friend that you jump in to sort of rescue the joke and go, yeah, and think of another version, and suddenly it's all okay and we're all enjoying it. I think that's what Jack's doing.
Yeah, that works.
I think it's interesting here that Susie is talking to them in their earpieces and she's with Tosh. So we get to see that dynamic. And Tosh is clearly very dismissive and very distant, perhaps.
And I like that Tosh's explanation for why she's uncomfortable with Susie is then she says something like of why she does this job, you know, to sort of to protect, I'm paraphrasing here, but to protect the world, to save the city. And she says, and every day I've got to keep on working in a job with a bit less honour because of you. I really like that line.
Yeah.
Because it gives a lot of insight into what Tosh thinks of what she does.
Yeah.
Because she's there running translation softwares. And the others are there kicking out the plug.
Yeah.
But she has this fundamental idea that Torchwood is for the good.
Yeah. It's something, it should be aspirational. To work for Torchwood should be honourable.
Yeah.
Is not something anyone else seems to think.
No.
People talk about how fun the job is or how intoxicating it is, but never how worthy it is.
Yeah.
So they bring Max in and they realise what's up with him, which is that if you say the word Torchwood, he just becomes wildly aggressive for exactly 10 seconds. So we get our first hint that this is something really, really specific. This isn't someone losing control in fact, isn't there a line about it? You know, if this is psychosis, it's an incredibly specific one. It looks much more like some sort of post-hypnotic suggestion or some kind of brainwashing or coding.
Yeah. At which point, Jack heads back up to his office and Gwen storms in to speak to him, right?
Yeah.
This argument I find really funny because Jack is in charge of Torchwood. Gwen is still relatively new.
Yeah.
Gwen storms in and then says, Jack, what did you expect? Okay, you guys never asked anything about Susie. Her dad is dying of cancer, which none of you seem to know. And you give his daughter the one thing that can bring people back to life. Is it any wonder she got obsessed? Like, what did you expect? You should have checked this. And instead of Jack taking that on board and being like, well, that's something to think about, Jack's like, right from the start, you associated Susie's death with you, and you got out of control when you were using the glove on her, and you forced her to come back for good. So it's both of our fault. Like, those two things are not the same, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you have all this super alien equipment. You should really check on the people you're giving it to because it might drive them mad. And he's like, oh yeah? Well, you were resentful that she tried to kill you.
Yeah.
So I guess it's both of our fault, isn't it? No, that's not the same. And you're in charge.
Yeah.
You oversaw the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, having a go at me for not vetting my employees properly? Well, what about you?
What about you 10 minutes ago today when you did the thing I told you to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
What about that, huh?
I suppose what Gwen Cooper has identified is a really old Torchwood moment of the week for before we even started watching, where Jack decided to give Susie Costello a resurrection gauntlet. I think most people have someone they would love to bring back from the dead if they could.
Yep.
And
how many ancient stories about how dangerous it is to bring people back from the dead do we need to know that this thing is cursed? And so the Torchwood moment of the week is giving it to Susie at a time when he wasn't checking if they were taking stuff home with him.
Yeah.
Which by the time Torchwood started in episode 1, we knew was a big problem.
Yes, yeah. And that is a fair point for Gwen Cooper to raise. But let's talk about the alternative, which is that the accusation is that because Gwen feels a certain amount of guilt about the death of Susie, she's too eager to bring Susie back from the dead. Do we think that's true? Do we think that's in the mix?
It is in the mix. But Jack has given Susie the one thing that can bring people back to life while her dad is dying of cancer.
Yeah.
He's also then given Gwen the one thing that can bring people back to life and told her to use it on the one person who it's the hardest for her to empathize with because she has resentment about it.
Yeah.
He's made both of those decisions.
Yeah.
That's not well, what about this thing you did? No, Jack, that's another thing you did, actually.
That's such
so
a
you're
good
just
point.
adding to Gwen's pile here.
That's like if your partner comes up to you and goes, hey, I'm a little bit sad because you didn't do the dishes and you said you would. And you're like, maybe that's true. But I also didn't put the bins out.
Yeah.
So I don't, that's not.
Or maybe like, I didn't do the dishes, but that's because you said you were so fed up of me doing them badly that you were going to do them yourself. Like,
yeah. I like that we've keyed into the key thing here, which is that Gwen and Jack are becoming a bit like a couple.
Yeah.
Like they are the parents of Torchwood, and one of them is very practical and the other one is like, no, let's think about people's feelings a little bit. And Gwen is definitely correct.
Yeah. So then he says, we're both responsible. And they both sit in silence. Don't know why she was okay with that. And then she's like, well, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, I don't know. She's like, what if she lives forever and it's just you and her undying forever? And he's like, I'd sooner kill her myself. No one deserves that. And she's like, would you kill her? He's like, yeah, mate. Oh, try me. Yeah, I'll stab her right now. Bring her in. And that is about to become more relevant. Yeah. Because soon Jack's going to realise he does have to kill her.
Yeah. I think this is really great. And this is I think of it as Russell T Davies plotting. I don't know if it's Russell's writing here particularly, but I think it's very indicative in his writing where he will set something up because he understands the rhythms of television so well. He really knows how to set you up for something really unexpected. So right now, Jack is saying, I'd kill her in a minute. Would you? Yeah, I would. You test me. You show me. So we know that, okay, that is going to get tested. We can probably sense, because we've seen television before, that is going to be put to the test. We'll see what he does. So we then get a conversation between Susie and Gwen. And here they start to bond. And we know as an audience, having watched the whole episode, that Susie's doing this on purpose. She's taking advantage of Gwen's compassion and kindness. And also, she's making herself vulnerable. It's interesting that Susie expresses jealousy. She's jealous of Gwen taking over from her. And then the gut punch of a line where she says, are you sleeping with Owen? And Gwen, is very flustered, doesn't know what to
Yeah,
say.
because she says that Gwen has replaced her.
Yeah.
Gwen says, no, I've got my own purpose here.
Yeah.
And then she says, well, you've slept with Owen, though.
Yeah.
So, you're me.
Yeah. I think Owen's relationship with Gwen is more meaningful and nicer than whatever relationship he can possibly have had with Susie.
Yeah.
Where you've got two incredibly destructive people together. Like, I can't, like, I don't think that was nice sex, but I'm sure it was very good.
Also, though, it's such an extra kick in the teeth for Tosh to know that, yeah, he will sleep with every woman that comes in except her.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, they're chatting about how good the job is mainly, though, and they're really bonding, because when Susie spotted Max in the club before he was about to hit Gwen thanked her for saving her life, and Susie said, maybe I came back for a reason. So she's really setting this idea up to Gwen that I may have tried to kill you that one time, but I guess I came back for a reason, because really we're destined to be friends.
Yeah, that's good. I hadn't clocked that that's what she meant by that, but you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At which point, Owen calls Jack to the autopsy room in a way that I really like, because for once it's not like, hey boss, think you better take a look at this. It's, hey Jack, can you come to the autopsy room? Something I think you should see. Kind of urgent. And then he unpresses the radio. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's a polite way to do that message. Like, hi mate, just got something to show you. Head over when you can. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
They're always just hanging up on each other.
Yeah. It's quite nice. It's a new energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I approve of it.
Yeah.
Especially given that what he's got to show him, it is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we are finding out is this. When you use the glove on a corpse, it creates a link between you and that person. And that link severs when they die again. Because Susie hasn't died, that link between her and Gwen, who used the glove, is still active. Mm-hmm. Gwen and Susie are still linked, which means Susie's continued life is being stolen from Gwen. Mm-hmm. Gwen is slowly dying. So if they don't intervene quickly, Gwen has a few hours left, I think that's right. Yeah,
something like that. It's pretty obvious at this point. They've got to kill Susie again, because no matter what, this energy's being drained. She was never supposed to come back in the first place, so let's kill her. What they don't know is at this point, Gwen, meanwhile, has snuck back into the interrogation room to speak to Susie and hidden a message under a cookie that says, road trip? Because she is offering to take Susie to see her dad.
Yeah.
She knows she's doing something wrong, but she really just wants to try and help her because she's just so kind and easily to manipulate. So Gwen has taken Susie in her wheelchair to her car. She loads her in and they're heading to go see her dad. Jack then goes into the interrogation room ready to kill Susie. And my favourite thing about this, that I think I kind of want to nominate for a Torchwood Moment of the Week, is he goes in gun drawn. Like, this woman is in a wheelchair because she's very weak because she's just woken up from being dead. Yeah. She's got a huge bullet hole in her head. But he goes in like, hey, Susie. If they hadn't been gone, what's he going to be like? Hey, Susie. Oh, don't mind this. I was just checking it still works. But I'm like, what? So he goes in. It's like, they're not here. Anyone know where they are? They're like, I thought they were there. That's weird. So they look on the CCTV in the area. The SUV is still where it normally is. And then they check Gwen's car and they see her loading Susie into it. My main point about this bit is, so Gwen closes the door and drives off. And they've just left the wheelchair at the side. So I was like, oh my God, what? You can't just, those are quite valuable. And, you know, you can't just leave it on the side of the street. Someone's going to steal it. However, the place they are is the little car park right next to the Norwegian church, right? That's where it looks like.
Yes.
And a few years ago, I was parked there and we were loading stuff into the boot and I took the parcel shelf out to sort everything out. And I closed the car and I drove away and I left my parcel shelf just sitting out on that bit of grass. Pretty much, I'd say 5 parking spaces away from where that wheelchair is. About a day later, I realised my parcel shelf is gone. And I'm like, oh my God, where is it? And I trace my steps in my head. I'm like, I took it out by the Norwegian church. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to buy a new one. This is going to be so stressful. But I just drove there. 48 hours later, still there.
Wow.
Just sitting there by the Norwegian church. And now I'm like, actually, that side of the bay, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
If it's night, no one's going to take that wheelchair. Yeah. She's dead right, and I'm sorry for judging.
So the rest of Torchwood look on the CCTV and they see Gwen getting into the car. And at this point, I feel like they're weirdly calm about it. Like, in my mind, I was expecting one of them to break into a run, to get out and stop her. But no, they're just going, yeah, what are they doing?
That's a good point, actually, because they've just figured out this energy thing.
Yeah.
So even if Gwen was just nipping around the bay to take her for an ice cream,
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Someone I got to tell you.
Yeah. But anyway, they wouldn't manage it anyway, because at this point, the hub goes into lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
This is the second lockdown we've seen in this
Yep.
series. Yeah, there's interesting links between this episode and Cyberwoman, actually, because in both cases, it's a case of bringing someone incredibly dangerous who's already in the hub.
Yeah.
And who becomes an increasing threat with a sort of undead zombie vibe. And in this case, what's happened is Max, the killer, has more than one thing that he's programmed to do. It's not just that he starts killing for 10 seconds when he hears the word Torchwood. It's that, well, Toshiko puts it together that he will eventually start chanting the same Emily Dickinson poem over and over. And once he's delivered it 100 times, there's a vocal code in the hub that makes it go into lockdown. And they realize that all of this has been planned.
Yeah.
Susie has masterminded this ridiculously elaborate plan where she has been checking in with this guy once a week for 2 years.
Installing this instruction in him, right?
And probably the instruction's been there for years. It's just that she's meant to check in once a week. And if she misses a week, that's okay. But if she misses 3 consecutive months, then the programming says, then you can kick in, then you can start killing, because that means something bad has happened to me. Which is astonishing, because it means that if she'd died through any other means, this would still have happened.
Yeah.
So she has set up this guy to just start killing people, whatever can conceivably happen to her. It's designed in such a way that Torchwood will bring him in, that he will then lock down the hub, because she is so confident that by that point they will have brought her back to life with the glove technology. So...
And they figure this all out, right? They're like...
Yeah.
Because at first they're like, but how could it go into lockdown? It must have been done from the inside. And then they're like, hang on a minute, we've got a visitor. They're figuring it all out, and they say, but that must have mean that she installed this like long before she died. And Owen says, you got to admit, that is not bad. I'm picking her for my team.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favourite lines that, you know, the ones you just remember. That sometimes someone will do something and I'll be like, I'm picking her for my team. It's just very good. Because you've got to admit, it's not bad.
Yeah. It's excellent. It's probably the most competent thing we've ever seen anyone at Torchwood do.
Yeah, because so you're likely to die young if you work for Torchwood.
Yeah.
And once she had the resurrection glove, she was like, this means that I don't have to die.
Yeah.
So she has somehow either predicted or set up the fact that when it's used on her, it will do this to whoever uses it.
Yeah.
So either she mastered the glove and cracked it,
yeah,
and then made it so that that would always happen to her. Unless maybe using the glove for a long time gives you that connection to it, so that it's ever used on you. Maybe. It's very good. She just didn't want to die.
Yeah, and that becomes an increasing thing here, which is that we realised that the Susie we met in episode 1 basically had this whole other life going on, these other motives that we didn't understand. Her goal is to live forever. Now, we're going to see what happens with her father. You know, Gwen is so compassionate, but she's also quite blinded. She thinks the problem is that Susie has a father who was dying of cancer. That was the problem. No, it wasn't. We later realised that she doesn't care. In fact, quite the opposite. She hates her father and wants him dead. She cares about herself. She wants her to live forever. It's an incredibly selfish motive.
Yeah.
And Gwen, of course, assumes a selfless one because she's selfless.
Yeah. So Susie, as soon as she started working with the glove, had obviously been like, this is it. This is how I can live forever. It's very good.
Yeah. So Gwen and Susie are driving in the car. They're driving on their way to the hospital. And they talk about Jack. Susie says, look, I do remember this. I shot Jack before I died, but I saw him come back to life. That did happen, didn't it? And Gwen admits that, yeah, that did happen. Susie says, but how? And Gwen says, I don't know. He said something happened to him long ago, but he's been very cagey about it. I just don't know. And Susie goes, I think she asks the question, who is Jack really? And I think it's good at this point to be reminded that that's a big theme of the show, is who is Jack Harkness?
Yeah.
And I thought I'd put that question to you. I mean, because I don't know if I do find Jack particularly mysterious, actually. I think he's done a lot of stuff, but I think I sort of understand him as a character. I don't need to know the nitty-gritty, the ins and outs. I realise he's had exes that I don't know about. We'll later find out just how many lives he's lived, how much he's achieved in that time. Just all this unbelievable stuff that he's lived through. But I think he's pretty what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm. If I was in their position, I think I'd assume that it was Torchwood that made Jack live forever.
Yeah.
Like some kind of interaction with aliens went wrong, and that's just what happened to him.
Yeah.
And that's why he still works for Torchwood. Like, I don't think I'd complicate it that much.
Yeah.
But they also know aliens are real, so I'd probably be like, oh, maybe he's an alien.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he could just as easily be a Time Lord.
Yes.
And the only thing they don't know about him is that he's got two hearts.
Yeah.
It might not be the same, I can't die. But effectively it would be.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. I think it's fine for the show to put an emphasis on the mystery of Jack Harkness, but I'm not sure it's a particularly compelling mystery.
Mm-hmm.
All there is to learn about Jack is just biographical details from his past. We might meet an ex-girlfriend of his. We might find out he was alive during a war in the 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing fundamental, I don't think, that can drastically change the way we see
Yeah, because his
character.
motivations are pretty clear.
Yeah.
He wants to save the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's quite ruthless about the way he'll set out to do it.
Mm-hmm. So meanwhile in the hub, the gang are trying to work out how to get out of their lockdown. They can't call anyone outside until Yanto says, oh, I've got signal if you want to use it.
Yeah.
So how did you do that? I was like, I'd just use the water tower as a relay. They've all just been chatting bullshit, and Yanto's been like, oh, I guess I'll just fix the problem.
Yeah.
Everyone's a bit busy.
Classic Yanto.
Yeah.
Quietly do your job.
And Jack's like, well, who do we call? So he called Detective Swanson, our old friend from the police.
Very nice to see her again.
Yep. And he's very reluctant to explain the actual problem
Yeah.
because it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
So he says that he needs her help. So they're sort of logged in to their own base,
Yeah.
which she loves.
Yeah. She is so delighted. This scene doesn't quite work for me, and I can't work out why, because the concept is amazing,
Mhm.
which is the Detective Swanson's like, sorry, you're locked in your own base. No, I'm going to need a moment.
Mhm.
Like, it becomes a moment of real comedy. I think maybe they could have played it a bit more broadly. I think the direction, it still feels like drama here.
Mhm.
And actually, I could have done with just a proper laugh out loud.
Uh-huh.
Like, guys, gather around. Like, sorry, I'm putting you on loudspeaker. Say it again. Like that. But that is what happens.
Yeah.
Is the police openly mock Torchwood for getting locked in their own base. And you can tell they're just so pleased because, walking around being so high and mighty, they're locked in their own base.
Yeah.
There's this sense of the police as like, just, how many times have we been inconvenienced by these guys and now they need our help?
Mm-hmm.
So then we cut to Gwen and Susie in the car, and Gwen is falling asleep. That's what she thinks. We know it's because her energy's being drained.
Big shout out to the makeup department for this bit, I think.
Yeah.
From this point to the point where Gwen collapses and then actually when she's in the car almost like passed out, she looks like she's dying.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what they've done, but she looks not well. And it's really, really good because more colour is coming into Susie's cheeks and Gwen is just looking paler and paler and like dark around her eyes, but it looks so good.
Yeah.
It really, you don't need to be told, oh, she has worsened. You just see her in the car, you're like, oh, something's happening there.
Yeah. It's enough for her to just do the odd line about lacking energy and it reminds us of what's happening. So she puts on the radio. This is a lovely little human moment, I think. She thinks she's falling asleep, so she puts the radio on to keep her awake. Nice bit of human observation.
Yeah.
And the song, it's an old song. Again, it's almost like a nice conversation between Gwen and Susie. Gwen goes, oh, I don't know the song. And Susie goes, it's ancient. My mother used to sing this to me.
Yeah.
And Susie, and I don't think she's putting it on here, just openly weeps as she thinks of her mother. Yeah,
that bit, the whole conversation between Susie and Gwen in the car hit me really hard as a teenager, like all of that. Because that's where you're at as a teenager, isn't it? Contemplating life, the meaning of life and what happens after death and what's it all for. And so there's just the pacing of these scenes is really, really nice. Susie says, my mum used to sing it all those years ago. And then she pauses and says, before I died. And her delivery of that always really hit me because it's like, I don't know, there's just something unique about it that makes me imagine that one day there will be the last time we ever hear a song. Yeah. It's one thing to be an old person or even just unknowingly soon to die. Yeah. And to imagine those things from your childhood. But if you could be given the ability to look back on it after your death, knowing that was it, there's something different about it. Yeah. And that's when Susie is not acting at that point. Yeah. That's like, oh God, I didn't you know, I didn't realize how messed up all of this is. There's a bit where Gwen is talking about falling asleep at the wheel, and Susie says, 1 corpse is enough for this car. And Gwen's like, well, don't call yourself that. And so she's still like, she's really just drawing her out. And then they have that conversation about the music, and it's just...
Yeah, it's amazing that Gwen is able to connect with this person still. Like, we as an audience now hate Susie, I think, or at the very least, we know that she's a proper enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And Gwen is still there trying to build these bridges and going, no, don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
So we get Susie talking about her mother, and we don't learn much about Susie's past or her family. We get tiny little windows, but I think it's really effective.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it feels like it's been underwritten. I feel like it's subtle on purpose. We know that there's something very complicated in Susie's relationship to her parents, and that's enough. And we can tell that the one thing that breaks through to her is talking about her mother,
mm-hmm.
or reminding her of that relationship. And then what we get from her father as well is very subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And I admire that.
Yeah. So they continue their conversation, right? Gwen asks what it was like to die, basically. And Susie asks if she's religious. And Gwen gives this very cute little idea of an afterlife where she would go and see all the people she loved, and she'd see her gran. And Susie mocks that a bit, and then is like, well, you want to really know what it's like? There's nothing. It's just darkness. And Gwen says, if there's nothing, then what's it all for? And she says, this is the point of it all. Like driving through the night. And
the line is driving through the dark.
Driving through the dark,
which is
yeah.
gorgeous, I think.
And then the other one where she says, we're just animals howling in the night because it's better than silence.
Yeah.
And all of that, like all that stuff as a teenager just it messed me up, because I was just like, don't amplify these thoughts I already have. And then the shot they have of them both just sat in the car driving after those lines, just sitting with that sort of poignant point is like, it's heavy.
Yeah. And you realize that of course Gwen believes in an afterlife,
mm-hmm.
because she's the optimist, she's the one finding positivity in it, and Torchwood just keeps finding new ways of dragging her down.
Yeah.
And for someone like Gwen, who still dreams of seeing her grandmother in a white light at the gates of heaven, to be told, I've died, I've checked, there's nothing, don't worry about it. It's horrible. In fact, it's worse than there's nothing, because we also get a line going, no, I didn't say I was alone.
Yeah.
I said there's nothing, but there's something moving in the dark.
Why do you think I was so desperate to come back?
Yeah.
And this is the beginning of one of our great Torchwood foreshadowings that goes somewhere, then kind of goes somewhere, then comes out, and then is never mentioned again.
Yeah. But here it's very evocative. So back in the hub, I'll sum up the scene. They managed to undo the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how they did that. So they work out that if chanting a poem 100 times causes it to lock down, presumably a verbal trigger will open it back up again. But what could that trigger be? So they assume it'll be another Emily Dickinson poem,
mm-hmm.
because that's what locked it down. And they saw a copy of the complete Dickinson in Susie's locker. So they get Detective Swanson to find a copy of the book, presumably an identical copy of the book, and just read through the poems. Read the next verse. Okay, that doesn't work. Read another poem. She's just going through this.
Which is stupid as well, because if the verbal trigger one way had to be done 100 times, would you not try stuff a few more times just to rule it out?
So I find this an incredibly frustrating scene, because my wife works in an escape room,
mm-hmm. and
we love escape rooms. And the worst thing in the world is like an unsatisfying puzzle. You want that puzzle to be, oh yeah, once you realize what it is, it could never have been anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this is like, basically. You're going, okay, the clue is an Emily Dickinson poem 100 times and a copy of the book. What's the answer? Eventually, Tosh works it out, and it's the ISBN number.
She says, if letters trigger it, maybe numbers reverse it, which is already like, sure, it's a creative thinking.
Yes.
We can be in that realm. But like, I think I would prefer it if we sort of had almost montages, like we're cutting back and forth all the time of them trying 1,000 different things.
Yeah.
And then she comes up with it.
Yeah.
Because then we just quickly answer a lot of things.
Yeah.
So we say, maybe numbers reverse it. Try the ISBN. Every book's got a different number. Jack's like, but the keyboards don't work. She's like, but the membrane underneath just might recognize the code.
Yeah.
It's like, now we're just shoving stuff in.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a better way to do this.
I think you're right. I think the only thing you need to change is to make them seem desperate when they do it.
Yeah.
I like the idea of them just tired and broken going, we tried the ISBN, it's not going to be the ISBN.
Yeah, or even like...
Try it, okay.
Maybe,
that worked.
Yeah, or they've gone through so much of the book this wouldn't work for the time of Gwen and Susie driving, but there could be a way to do it.
Yeah.
That like Detective Swanson flips it over, and then maybe because it would be really nice if it was her actually. If she's like, hang on a minute, the only thing I haven't read you is this, you know, like something simple like
that's
that.
quite nice. Yeah, I mean, I think I like that it's Tosh because I like giving her the clever solution. The problem is that it isn't clever. So the note is right, which is we want Tosh to do something clever, but what she comes up with is just so out of nowhere. There's like a very famous scene there's an 80s anniversary episode of Doctor Who called The Five Doctors. There's a sort of an electrified chessboard that they have to get across. And the master in that story goes, "Don't worry, Doctor, it's as easy as pie," and just magically seems to hop from one square to the next and survives it completely. And the Doctor's like, "Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean?" And then later on he goes, "Easy as pi, the digit 3.14159." But then just jumps on random squares. And sorry, how did you get from that number to like what squares to jump on? And this feels like that, but more so, because at least I can be like, maybe he jumped on the third square, the first, the fourth, the fifth. Yeah. But this is that same sort of, you've just said stuff. And yeah, I think I could have done with a little bit more emphasis on the actual puzzle. If
they'd like maybe exhausted a few other options, they're like, okay, well, if it's that, what about it backwards? Okay.
Yeah.
What about the number of lines per verse? You know, stuff like that. And then they get into numbers, so then they go for ISBN. It's just a bit silly.
Yeah.
But basically, it works first time.
Yeah.
It unlocks it. It really reminds me of, it's kind of the opposite thing. There's an episode of The Simpsons where they get locked in somewhere and they try picking the lock and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And they try all these other things. And then Lisa just opens the door later. And they're like, how'd you do that? She's like, I just tried picking the lock again. I don't know why we only ever try things once. And I really like it. It's got the same vibe as that.
Yeah. Susie and Gwen get to the hospital and they go to Susie's father. And there's two major revelations here. And one of them is Gwen is now so unwell. It's clearly not just tiredness, and she doesn't know what's going on, and Susie tells her. And I love this line. "Sorry, Gwen, you're getting shot in the head, slowly." Because she is slowly absorbing the damage of Susie's gunshot. It's horrible and such an amazing line. I don't know, just everything about it, just the idea that Gwen's brain is going to become damaged. It's so... Yeah. It's real body horror. And then the second thing is Susie sees her father and says, "This was worth coming back from the dead for," and kills him. Yeah. And says, "You deserve this, you bastard." Yeah. We don't know why. We don't know what he's done. We don't
Immediately when he wakes up, she says, "Dad, it's Susie." And there's terror in his eyes, which I really like. Like, what was she up to before?
Yeah. I love it. I love that we get to fill in the blanks here. Sometimes I feel like a story could be fleshed out more, but here we have everything we need.
Yeah, I agree.
And I like that even Gwen, she's still never going to know exactly what went down. What was this history? Is it fair that Susie has this issue with her father? Certainly it seems that her father's aware that Susie's not a safe person. Yeah. It's one of those twists that when it happens, you go, oh, of course. Yeah. It's so believable for the character. And then we're leaving again. And now it's Gwen in a wheelchair and Susie taking her outside. By this point, Susie is now pretty much fighting fit. Yeah.
There's a real sense of terror as well as it's revealed to Gwen what's happening to her. And Susie's pushing her down the corridor in the wheelchair. And she's so weak, but she tries to reach out for help to a nurse, but she's too weak. She can't properly get their attention. And she just bats her hand away and sends, horrible. But is that... So Susie must use another wheelchair from the hospital. Right? Yeah. Because I'm thinking, would have been really useful to just load it in the car and take it with you.
Think these things through, Susie. So this leads to a car chase. Susie and Gwen are driving through the night. Now it's Susie driving. And the others, they've managed to get out of the hub. But where do we go next? They're trying to find them. I didn't follow how they worked it out because I was properly at the edge of my seat in this. I was really into it.
So they have a tracker on Gwen's car. They have a tracker on all of their cars. And they're tracking it and they know where it is. But they're trying to work out, based on the turns that they take, what their endpoint could be. Because obviously, if you are going from this place to the ferry port and you choose to take this road, not the other, it'll become increasingly obvious that could be your only destination. Because if you're going there, you would take this one instead, because they'll obviously be taking the quickest route. So they're trying to work it out. And Tosh says, at the moment, they're far enough away from their destination that I can't pinpoint where they must be headed. So just keep chasing them. Because I guess her theory is that because they took a detour to the hospital, hopefully, based on their destination, these guys might be able to take a detour that's quicker. Maybe they could beat them there. I guess that's the theory.
Yeah. We have a phone call between Jack and Susie at this point, and they talk about life and death. Because that's another thing this episode is doing, is it's tying in Jack's immortality to Susie's stolen second life. And it's asking to what extent are those the same or different.
Yeah.
Susie thinks it's the same. As far as she's concerned, Jack's a massive hypocrite if he thinks I'm not allowed to be alive.
Imagine it turned out that the reason he was immortal is because he did the exact same thing to someone else.
Oh, yeah.
Then you'd have a point. But
I wonder if Susie just thinks that.
Maybe.
He'll
that's how I did it, so that's how he must have done it.
But and I think we certainly feel that these are not equivalent things. And also Jack, I suppose we don't know this yet, but Jack isn't particularly comfortable with his immortality. He didn't choose this. This was inflicted on him. Either way, they have that conversation. Something strange happens now, which struck me as extremely strange when I first watched it, and it's still strange now, which is the sun comes up incredibly quickly.
Oh, yeah.
They're driving through the dead of night. It's pitch black. By the time they arrive at the pier, it's quite well lit and it doesn't feel like morning light. And there's no shot of sunrise.
It does. I think it does feel like morning light.
It doesn't feel like dawn light, I suppose.
Sure.
Like, I remembered it. Even before we got there, I remember how weird it is that it's suddenly daylight. So I was thinking, I must have missed a little shot of the sunrise. And there isn't really. I'm happy to suspend my disbelief, but it feels really strange to go from pitch black to this much light when we know it's a race against time.
Yeah, I guess it's probably meant to be morning, but they didn't finish shooting it in time, right? So, but I reckon they were recording at morning.
Yeah.
But if you try to imagine, so Owen says Gwen has a matter of hours. Let's assume they went to the crime scene in the middle of the day. They go to the club that same night. So the club is open. So by the time they go to the club, it's like 8 p.m.
Yeah.
By the time they're figuring all this out, it's about midnight.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's not, maybe they were locked down for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yes.
And maybe it's summer.
There we go.
And the sun is coming up. I think the time, they will have carefully written this. I'm sure the time makes sense. It's just the lighting in that scene that doesn't make sense. You're right. But it does make it much more interesting to think that the thing that we were criticizing about, like how quickly they got out the base when they decided they wanted to, if they'd kept cutting back more, if we'd had more of that, it would really feel like it is the 3 or 4 hours that it's supposed to be.
So they arrive at the pier, and this is a nice moment. So Susie and Gwen are at the pier. Jack and Owen arrive, and Jack immediately goes to Susie. Owen immediately goes to Gwen. It's a nice little reminder of the priorities of these characters, not just as characters, but also that's their role.
He's a doctor.
And Jack's the boss. He confronts Susie, and we get the final confrontation. Now, this is what I meant earlier about the fact that Jack said, yeah, I just shoot her. And Gwen going, could you? Yeah, I could. And now we're going to see him, we're giving him the opportunity to prove himself right if he can do that.
Because he gives Susie the warning on the way, doesn't he? He's like, we're going to catch up with you. And if she's dead when we get there, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you one last final time. And she's like, but could you though? And he's like, He's like, I'll do it, mate. Give me a knife right now.
So twice Jack has been asked, could you kill her in cold blood? And twice he said, yeah, no problem. Absolutely, I could. And here we have it, the confrontation. And Susie says, you can't, he's threatening to kill her, to shoot her. And she says, but you can't, because you're really killing Gwen Cooper by doing that, because there's part of her in me. Can't you see it? Can't you see that there's part of her in me? And he goes, not one bit, and shoots her cold dead.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's just great, because we are so used to that thing in television where if someone is asked, could you though? Yeah. Second time, could you? Yeah. We think the rule of 3 means he's not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And no, you can. He was absolutely spot on.
She tries to proper psych him out. She's like, but I'm the last thing left of her. Can you really do? He's like, nah, bang.
Yeah. And she means on a sort of literal level, there's some of her life in me. And Jack replies, there's not one bit of Gwen in you. And means Gwen is wonderful. She is the picture of compassion. And we've been told from the start, compassion is what makes the glove work. So Susie was the most empathic of any of us. And now we're being told, do you know what? No.
That can't be true.
Just not true.
Yeah.
You are not Gwen. How dare you? Gwen isn't a replacement for you.
But
Gwen.
it makes sense if you think of Susie's character, because Susie's obviously a master manipulator.
Yeah.
She's cold and calculated and not emotional. And it's interesting that they believed the glove worked after empathy because she told them that.
Yeah.
Because that was important to the way that she was seen by them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work.
Yeah.
He shoots her many times. She's still kicking.
Yeah.
And then they figure out that it must be because the glove still has this connection. And this is another example of Torchwood being very good at protocol.
Yeah.
Because Yanto and Tosh are still back at the hub. And on the radio, they're like, code something, destroy the glove. And so they shout, and they literally, one of them shouts to the other, like code whatever it is, really quickly. And they both run to opposite places. They give her, I guess it's like a big gun. Did she just not have it on her at the time?
Yeah, I think she had,
Or maybe the gun, gauntlet, and they literally just like, bam, and it explodes. And at that moment, Susie has one last sort of gasp for breath and then dies straight away. And Gwen is immediately, they think they're too late when they arrive there, but as that happens, she has another breath of life and is going to be okay.
I love the shot of Toshiko shooting the glove.
Me too.
A
really quick focus pull from her to the glove and then bam.
I would have that as a poster.
Yeah.
There is something so visual about it. And also that feeling of just because it's Jack and Owen at the pier doesn't mean they've stopped being a team.
Mm-hmm.
There's still this coordination.
Yeah.
And there's something for all of the characters to do.
Mm-hmm.
So satisfying.
Yeah. And it's also nice. I just love Yanto and Tosh because they never make a fuss about things.
Yeah.
But they, in a crisis, are just very organised and cool-headed and will just run and get it done. And but that is a great shot. I'll make a gif of it for you.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I want that as a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what. I suppose if someone's got a really ugly glove, I'll use that as a reaction gif.
Yeah.
So we get this final warning from Susie that there is something out there in the dark and it's moving. And it's coming for you, Jack Harkness. It's building on what we knew earlier. Ooh, there's a thing coming. I wonder when that'll come up. Probably episode 13.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, not worth waiting for.
Not worth. Don't worry about it. Don't stress. Then we go back to the hub, and our final scene is Jack putting Susie's body away, and he's feeling quite glum. He's feeling quite down.
Well, before that, actually, we have a little. It's just about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
But actually, before we go to them putting Susie's body away, Gwen is sitting in the hub, sort of recovering. And it's this slow-mo thing of Jack walking past and smiling at her. And it's a moment I really like of Jack and Gwen because it's not this weird sexual tension.
Yeah.
It's love, but it's not romantic love.
Yeah.
I think in their character developments together, this probably marks the point at which he's like, I thought I loved her. Now I know I do because I came so close to losing her.
Yeah.
And the comparison of Susie to what Gwen represents is really important to him. But he just stops. And she's obviously feeling quite small because she's had a tough day. Yeah. And he just does this very gentle smile that is more of that kind of like dad thing. Yeah. I don't want to refer to Jack as the dad of a lot of them too much because I feel like that really muddles the dynamic later when he very much doesn't behave like a dad. But it's this sort of like caring figure of him respecting that these people are newer to this stuff than he is and they're clumsy humans and he is looking after them. Then Jack heads to Susie being put away in a little shelf.
So Jack is feeling quite low because he thinks one day we're going to run out of space. That's what he says. And we know, of course, and we find out later just how old Jack is, just how long he's worked for Torchwood. He's seen a lot of his staff die already, and today he's come very close to losing Gwen.
Yeah.
He's at a low ebb as he thinks, God, I'm going to outlive all these people because I can't die. And then Yanto pops up and this is my reading, I think Yanto decides to cheer him up and make him feel better by going, oh, sir, I've still got that stopwatch. And Jack goes, that's an extremely weird thing to say, Yanto Jones. I don't think I nor anyone watching understands what you mean by that. And Yanto goes, well, a lot of things you can do with a stopwatch. And Jack goes,
wink.
Oh yeah, I now completely understand, but I'm fairly sure no one watching does. I mean, we've read the tone. Clearly, it's something sexual, but
I can think of maybe 2 sexy games you could play with a stopwatch.
Yeah,
because they just involve timing each other.
Yeah,
and I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
those are the only things I can think that would make the stopwatch relevant.
I don't think it's being used as a toy of any kind. I don't think that's a pleasant object.
Unless it's lots of things you can do with a stopwatch. We know later, Naked Hide and Seek is a game they play.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe the nakedness is a given.
Yeah.
The stopwatches, think of all these cool games you could play with a stopwatch. And it's just this really wholesome thing. Like,
so this is my theory. I think Yanto's fetish is playing office boy.
sure.
You know, having this sexual relationship with his boss. I think I like the idea of he's like, oh, do you want me to do any filing for you? I think that's what he likes.
Yeah.
So the idea of him being like, oh, yes, I'll stand here with a stopwatch. You do whatever you want to do.
Whatever it is that you do.
I think there's a huge role play aspect to their dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
That's my reading.
The stupid joke I made in my head at this scene where they're standing and Susie's dead. I'm like, it's Torchwood and it makes sense, but it is really funny to look objectively at this and be like, they're flirting over the corpse of their deceased colleague. And I just like, my brain sort of said that sentence. They're like, why are they doing this over Susie's dead body? And I was like, I like to think Susie was like, I don't want you two ever hooking up or getting together.
Yeah.
Like, but we want to, over my dead body. And then that means that now they've unlocked her, it can begin. It's just a stupid little like word game that my brain played with. But I'm just accepting that as the truth now.
Do you know the thing about is 4 a big number? Depends on the context. Do you know that meme? So weird meme. So it's a Doctor Who meme where it's Clara and the Peter Capaldi Doctor talking in the TARDIS, and she goes, "Is 4 a big number?" And the Doctor goes, "Depends on the context." And I think the original line is something like, "Is 4 a big number?" It depends what you mean. Like dollars, no. Severed heads, yes. And I can't remember the real examples, but it gets presented as if it's a real scene from Doctor Who, but it's not in it. It's that's like, I don't know where the jokes come from, but someone's I think someone did it as like a tweet or a Tumblr post, and someone thought, oh, that fits these characters really well, so I'll do that. So I think we should just fake it as if that's a real scene in Torchwood over my dead body.
I actually really like after their flirt, Jack's walking away. And they go straight back into work mode, first of all. And Yanto's like, what do you want me to put on the death certificate? And Jack says, death by Torchwood. And then he's like, oh, maybe I'll put a lock on the door in case she goes on a walkabout again. And Jack's like, that won't happen. I think our days with the glove are over. Yanto says, I don't know about that. That's the thing about gloves, sir. They come in pairs. And Jack just does a very TV, stops in his tracks and looks back. And then, ooh, to be continued.
Yeah.
Also,
so
though,
good.
they come in pairs for species that have 2 hands.
True.
But there could be 6 of them.
That's true. That's true. It is a very hand-shaped glove, though, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Just because it's shaped like our hands.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's for humans.
No, that's true. That is true. I do like the line, though.
Yeah, me too.
It was very cool.
Because I like a classic cheesy foreshadowing.
Yes.
You know, like,
yeah.
aha, but dun dun dun. That's what they've done to us there.
Also, this is such a good episode. I like the promise of more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I would welcome a second glove because more stories like this, yes, please.
Yeah. So that's our episode.
That is our episode.
Yeah.
Very classic Torchwood. It's got death and betrayal and sex with assault.
Yeah. Shall we pick our Torchwood moment of the week?
Yes.
What were the nominations? I nominated the
way
Torchwood
they
arrival.
arrive.
Yeah, already. Very good. Also, we can't vote retrospectively Jack
No,
giving Susie the glove,
that
but it's
doesn't
good to
count.
make a mental note of
Yeah.
it. But I can nominate them getting the glove out again.
Yeah.
Just like, oh,
Yeah.
Gwen, you didn't try it this time. Why
Yeah.
don't you have a go?
That's mine, I think.
Yeah.
It's they go straight to, let's use the glove. That's not working. Get the knife out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just the speed at which they get these forbidden items.
It's so funny as well that one of our Torchwood moments of the week was the fact that they all stole something and Jack
Yeah.
didn't punish them. But what they did do was they put it safely in Yanto's box of spooky things.
Yeah.
And now in this episode, what they're doing is they're being like, Yanto, shall we open your box of spooky things? And everyone's like, well, I can't see a problem with that. They just get
It's
it out.
like if Pandora's box was opened by the person who initially sealed up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
You know what's in it. Yeah, but you know what?
Mhm.
Well, that's mine, I think. I would go for that.
I agree with that. There we go.
There we are.
Cool. And there we go. That was Torchwood Series 1, Episode 8. They Keep Killing Susie. The next one, Episode 9, is Random Shoes.
Yes.
Is that right?
Which I remember almost nothing about.
I'm unfair on Random Shoes. I have skipped it on rewatches in the past. I've joked to people that it's not very good. But every time I watch it, I'm pleasantly surprised.
Good.
I think my issue with it is that, well, it's not even an issue because it's not a bad thing, but my personal thing, what I want from Torchwood is it's just a bit like emotional cheesy for me.
I see.
You know, the
Yeah.
moral is too... you have to suspend your disbelief in a different way to normal. And it just is a bit jarring for me. But it's nice.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm excited to rewatch it.
Good.
And
Me
thank you
too.
for joining me. This has been lovely.
This has been lovely.
Thank you for joining me, viewers and listeners. I want to plug the Discord. I want to tell people about that.
Yeah.
So we've got a Discord now, thanks especially to our brilliant producer, Ro, for helping set that up. Join it. It's just a few of us at the minute, but everyone's really cool in there. We're talking mostly about queerness and Torchwood. I think those are the things we're excited about.
We're basically just extending our usual chats to the
Just
general
this.
population.
Yeah. But if you want to talk about Torchwood, especially if you're rewatching it yourself, but even if you're not, it's on our Twitter. We'll put the link in the description, I suppose. And we'd love to see you there.
While we're on the note of thanking, we'd like
Yes.
to officially thank both Katie and Ro, our brilliant producers, who have helped us set this all up for the past few episodes. I think we're into a rhythm of it now.
Yeah.
You guys seem to like the new setup, which is great.
Yes.
But we literally couldn't have done it without them. So
Oh, God.
that's
They
great.
work ludicrously hard so that
Yeah.
we can just chill out and have a nice chat.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Katie and Ro.